Hey guys, what is up? It's your girl, Grace Tori, and I'm back with a whole new podcast episode. I'm really excited for today's episode because I am going through all of the books that I've read in 2025 so far and giving my review on it. Some of them are a little bit more controversial, a little bit more hot takes, and some of them are a little bit more mainstream. So hopefully you guys find some books that you would like to read based off of my reviews, or if you've already read the books, you enjoy hearing about them once more. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. I try to read about 4 books a month, so I have quite a few to go over. I think I'm at like, I don't know, 9 or 10 right now for the year, which is not crazy, but it's also a good enough amount to get into. So I'm also going to be doing smaller reviews for books for each month on my TikTok, but I'm really excited about this one. Hopefully I can do something like this every like 3 to 4 months. But yeah, before I jump in, don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, all those fun things depending on what platform you're on. Also, comment down below if you can what your favorite book that you've read in 2025 is so far. I definitely want to know. I'm always adding to my TBR. I'm trying to build my bookshelf, so I'd love to hear it. All right, without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump on in. I'm Grace Tori, and you're listening to That Girl the Podcast. Grab a beverage of choice and settle in, because the new episode is starting now. So I have my journal with me. This journal is where I put everything for each year. So like all my goals, my monthly goals, where I'm at, where I want to be, things like that. I think I did an episode where I like did a deep dive into my journal, but anyway, these are my 2025 books that I've read. I like to write it down rather than put it on Goodreads or anything. I don't know, I'm just like a big journal girly. So I have the rating, the book, and my thoughts on it thus far. I think I'm up to 10 books, so let's just dive right in. The first book that I read was Fourth Wing. So this is one of the more mainstream ones. I'm still trying to make it through a lot of mainstream books, so some of these you've heard of and some of these you probably haven't, but the fantasy ones I feel like you definitely have. Anyway, Fourth Wing specifically, I feel like I'm coming at this with a different point of view than like the average reader because I've been a writer my whole life and I'm actually working on writing a fantasy book and then like a poetry book that I'm going to try and publish. I've talked about it on here before. So when I am going through and like reading, yes, the rating and the review is based on my personal opinion, but what goes into that is a lot more than like, oh, I enjoyed this book. It's like the structure of the book, the world building versus the action-packed side of it, how the characters are developed, the inner monologues and how they are framed. Like, I really dissect these books as I'm going along and make like mental notes of, oh, I really enjoyed this, or oh, I hated this, or whatnot. So that is kind of where I'm coming from when I look at these books. And that being said, Fourth Wing is one where I thought that the inner monologue of Violet was so well written. Like, I truly enjoyed it. I love a book that has a little bit of sarcasm and a lot of inner monologues, like where it's first person point of view, which is my personal favorite to read. The author tries to be sarcastic, but it kind of falls flat sometimes. It's usually with romance books, but with a fantasy book, it had that extra element of like sarcasm, and she did it so flawlessly. Like, Rebecca Yarros just did it, and then it jumped in. The world building was very well laid out well, which would make sense because it is set up in like a war college, so they have classes and things like that where she can throw in the world building, but it wasn't boring. Like, from the jump, it was super fast-paced, which I really enjoy. I liked the romance aspect. I'm such a romanticy person. I think that's my favorite genre, so I really liked that. My overall thoughts were it was really well written. I really did like it, and then like at the end, I was just like, damn, I need the next book, which it was out. So I did read that one a couple books down, which I'll get into. But yeah, I really liked Fourth Wing. I thought that it would rival ACOTAR for my favorite romantasy series, but it kind of fell flat later on, which I will get to. So moving on, I did give it a rating of an 8, by the way, out of 10. So moving on, Twisted Love was next. I personally did not like Twisted Love. I DNF'd the series. I finished the book, but I did not finish the series. Personally, I thought it was kind of predictable, and I know you could argue that with like almost any type of book because the layout and like format of all of these books are very similar, so you probably could say like, oh yeah, a romantasy book always has like some sort of predicament and then like it's slow burn or it's enemies to lovers or whatever, but the twists and turns are different, And I think that that was the problem with this book. I felt like I could predict every single thing that was going to happen. Like, I predicted, like, the uncle and, like, the family and, you know, them obviously falling for each other. There's, like, a dog hair on my nose. I'm so sorry I keep scratching it. But yeah, I was really hoping, I'm not, like, a huge, like, mafia type book reader. That's just not my specific like genre, but I was hoping it would be more like unpredictable than it was, and I think I would have preferred it. It just honestly wasn't my cup of tea. Like, it was well written for the most part, just not my thing. So I gave that one a 4. Now we are moving on to The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. I try to read 1 to 2 self-help books a month. I've fallen flat a little bit, but I started out right. So I really liked this book. I liked how in most self-help books it's very like kind of boring. It's like slow paced-ish, more kind of scientific and like philosophical, I guess, than having like a sense of humor or anything. But in this book, he had a really good sense of humor, and it was like telling me to get up out of bed and get my shit together, basically. Like, hey, we're all gonna die one day, so like you might as well make something of it, and like this sucks, and like yes it sucks, but are you really gonna be a victim? Like, I don't know. It was very much like what I needed to hear in a format I could understand. And with my ADHD, I have a hard time hanging out with like a boring book for too long. So it was self-help in a way that was interesting to me. So I did end up giving that book a 7, which for self-help is pretty high because I tend to rank those lower just because a romantasy book and like a self-help book just don't compare. So it's hard for me to get self-help books a high rating. So I thought that was nice. The next book I read, and this is the last January book, is Glossy. So if you're not familiar with this book, it is the story about how Glossier became a business and kind of like following the CEO, but it's written from the point of view of like a journalist who is getting information. So it's kind of like a really, really, really long article versus a like autobiography or biography even. It literally is like a very, very long article. It's actually not that long of a read, but compared to like reading in a magazine or listening to a podcast episode, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours, but maybe I'm totally off. Overall, I thought it was really informational, but if you're just like, oh, I'm really interested about hearing how this business came to be, I don't think it would be a book for you. Like, if you're just like, oh, I love that brand, I'd love to hear more about it, I don't think that would be the type of book. I think it was really good for me to listen to because I'm business minded and I am building businesses and trying to like own a business and one day be at that level. But I think if I didn't have that mindset and I wasn't looking at it from the lens of what can I learn from her as a CEO to not make the same mistakes or, you know, do things that worked well for her, that made it a lot better than if I was just interested in it. I think it would be boring if you weren't interested in the business side. So I did end up giving it a 5 just because it was only interesting if you're into the business part. I thought it would be more like, I don't know, I don't want to say dramatic, but personal, I guess. More of like a personal take. But it almost seemed like the CEO didn't want this book to be written. Like, she was very standoffish throughout the book. And when she did agree to be like interviewed, it just like, I don't know. It was weird. So yeah, that was January. Moving on to February. The first book I listened to was That Friend, and this one is by Sabrina Breyer. I love Sabrina Breyer. I listen to a lot of podcasts with her in it and such. And I really, sorry, my neighbors are like selling something on Facebook Marketplace, and so like my eyes keep getting distracted and looking over there out the window because I'm like, oh, what's going on? But I really like Sabrina Breyer. I think that this had the potential to be a really, really good book. The thing that I didn't like about it was that it was written almost as if it was like a show that you were listening to. So it wasn't like a book. It was like a scene and then like the end of the scene and then you move on to the next thing. I don't know, it wasn't like a graphic audio type beat. It was really like, I just don't know. The layout was unfamiliar to me, but I think that it was a little cringy, which is a personal preference thing. Like, I found it cringy. But I did like it. It's about like a podcaster who starts her podcast, and then like as she's putting the podcast up and growing, she's kind of putting it before all of her friends, and then like she also started the podcast instead of getting a job, and like her dad's kind of like, hey, I can't keep paying for you to live in New York and not have a job. So it was interesting in a sense that I found it kind of relatable with the podcast side, but I did just find it a little bit cringy, which I think is just, it wasn't my thing more than anything. I'm sure it is someone's thing, but I gave it a 4 just because, yeah, it wasn't the worst, but it wasn't my favorite. Moving on to The Boyfriend Candidate. This book is a little bit more of like a romance fiction book, like a feel-good romance book. I listen to a lot of those while I'm working because they're like witty and funny and romantic and feel-good, and when I'm working I don't really want to listen to anything too crazy. I can't listen to a fantasy book. Like I have to read a fantasy book. I don't know. That's just the rules in my head. I cannot understand what's going on if I try and do an audiobook. So anyway, The Boyfriend Candidate actually is the second book in like this little mini series. So I actually just finished the first one because I read them in the wrong order, and it's not that they're like in different, like it didn't mess with anything. It's just that it's like one sister's romantic story and then like the other sisters. So The Boyfriend Candidate is basically about a girl who meets a guy who's running for governor, and they kind of end up in a scandal and they have to pretend they're dating to avoid public scrutiny and potentially losing the election, and like her sister's in politics, so it's a huge thing. I really liked it. I thought it was really witty. It was really relatable in the sense that like she has a lot of anxiety and she's a little bit more on like the let's stay in instead of versus going outside. I just really related to her character versus like with the personality. I thought it was really well written, and because of that, very entertaining. Some of these books, I feel like, in my personal opinion, I feel like these little fun romance books are the easiest to write because they are so like low stakes. They're just like feel good. There's not really like a huge world building aspect. It's very much like placed in the human quote unquote world, like the regular world, and then they're just like, you know, coming together. So there's some issue that they have to overcome, and then eventually they end up falling in love. It's the same story over and over and over. So when you have a story like that, where it's the same trope, you have to make it really entertaining along the way, or you lose a lot of readers because they're like, I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending, or they did, it's just boring, so they don't really want to get there, because they're like, I know it's going to happen. I need some sort of like side trope, or I need something entertaining. So the type of writing was funny and entertaining and relatable, and that's what kept me interested. So I ended up rating this one a 6, which again is kind of high. I feel like 6 and 7s are like the highest I'll go with these types of books, just because I feel like an 8 to a 10, unless it's an amazing book, is reserved for like Romanticize, because I am a writer, so I take into account like the world building and things like that are super, super hard to do. And in my opinion, like a fantasy book is the hardest type to write, because you have to remember all the rules of the world, create the world. It has to be consistent. You have to make sure all the characters are well thought out. There's just so much more that goes into those types of books. And I'm not saying that writing any book isn't hard. It's just I feel that it's hardest to write those types of books. So that's why I kind of reserve 8 to 10. And it's also my favorite genre. So, you know. Moving on is Iron Flame. So I finished Iron Flame in February. I was in a reading slump, so I do want to say I had like that going on that I was working through. I just like couldn't get into anything, and that's why I kind of was like, and I didn't read as much. I feel like I would have really just like gotten through Iron Flame really quick. But I did talk to some of my friends who felt like Iron Flame also was really hard to get through. I just felt like it dragged. It dragged some. I didn't find myself, like, picking it up, like, full of suspense. Honestly, I didn't know or feel like Onyx Storm, I was kind of surprised it had the hype it did. Just because Iron Flame dragged so much that I thought she would have lost more readers. I will say that ending was really, really good, and it was obviously a cliffhanger, the typical Rebecca Yarros thing. But I felt like the middle chunk dragged so much that I'm surprised people didn't DNF it. Um, but again, I was in a slump, so I don't know if it was me or the book, but I have had other people say, like, I felt the same way, so that leads me to believe it was the book. Which I did give the book a 7, just because when you're thinking about, like, the world building and things like that, it was really well done. But I do want to say, like, I don't know, room for improvement. Sometimes I feel like in this series she gets lost because she says that she writes the beginning and she writes the end. She just has to figure out the middle. And I feel like she kind of loses the plot a little bit in the middle sometimes, just because it's such a big book. Sometimes it's kind of like, whoo, we're going this way. Oh, nope, need to redirect to get back to where we want to be. And that's really common. I feel the same way when I'm writing. Not that I'm comparing myself to her at all. She's, like, amazing and incredible, and, you know, we love her in this house. But it is common when you're writing and you know where you're trying to go that you get lost on the way there. So I could kind of tell that that was happening in Iron Flame and in Onyx Storm, not so much in Fourth Wing. So Iron Flame got a 7, like I said. And then the last book I read in February was Pucking Around. Do not get me started on this book. You hoes let me down. You let me down so hard. So, a little bit of backstory. I like the hockey player romance books. Like, I've read Icebreaker and Wildfire and Daydream. I read the Off-Campus series. I'm starting The Deal because I read, like, The Graham Effect and all that, but I haven't read, like, The Deal, The Mistake, all of those. I really like those types of books. I don't know what it is. I like the setup, the vibes. It's just, I don't know. It's something I like to listen to when I'm working and stuff. So, Pucking Around obviously was a huge, huge, huge book in Booktok, like, last year. And I just thought of it because I was like, what's a good hockey book that's kind of romantic that everybody liked? And that was the first one that came to mind because it was so big. It's literally, like, I see it every time I go to Target. Like, it's a big book. And I asked one of my friends, like, what did you think of this book? Because she loves hockey, so I knew she had read it. And she said, oh, it was good, but it was really, really spicy. And I'm like, oh, I can handle a little bit of spice. Or a lot of bit of spice. Like, spice does not bother me. I like it as long as it adds to the story. Like, if you're just, like, basically just going at each other the whole book and there's no plot, then I'm like, absolutely not. But a lot of times it adds to the story, and that's why I like it. So I was like, oh, a lot of spice, not a big deal. You guys, I was not expecting this. So it was a Why Choose book, which I didn't know what that meant, and now I know. This girl ended up with no okay, spoilers. She ended up with 3 guys. She ended up married to 3 guys. She ended up dating 3 guys. And I don't have anything against polygamy. That's not my thing. But girl, go off. Like, there were 2 problems I had with this book. One, I felt like all of the smut outweighed the plot. It was just like, oh, these 2 are having, like, a threesome. And then these 2 are having, like, a threesome. And then now all 3 of them are going at it. So sorry if you have kids in the car, by the way. I totally forgot to say that this is, like, not appropriate for kids. This book specifically. The rest is fine. It was just, like, holy cow, do they ever get tired? Like, it was just constant. And I felt like the plot wasn't there because it was so focused on that. Like, there were some really good, there was potential for some really good plot moments and some trope and some, you know, character development, but it wasn't there. And then the bigger problem that I had was I hate Rachel. Hate's a strong word, but I just felt like she was so manipulative. Everything was about her. She never asked them what they wanted. Like, when she did, it was because she felt some type of way and she was like, I need their validation. It wasn't that she actually cared. I just felt like it was the Rachel show and everything revolved around her, and, like, these guys were kind of manipulated into the relationship, which consent is a big thing for me. And yes, they agreed to be a part of it, but at the same time, I felt like she kind of manipulated them and was like, yeah, if you want to be in a relationship with me, you have to be in a relationship with them. And, like, it's great. They love you. Like, we all look. I don't know. It was giving cult leader. Like, I didn't like it at all. I just personally hated her, and I DNF'd that series. I finished that book, and I think that's the only book that I've ever read in a while, at least, that I finished out of spite. Because, guys, it is a 25-hour long audiobook. 25 hours. And I knew at hour 17 I wanted to DNF. I knew way before that, but at hour 17 I was like, I want to give up. This isn't going to get any better. And I still had 8 hours left, and I was like, I'm going to hate finish this. I'm going to finish this out of spite. Because I just need to know, like, is it as bad as I think? And I've already invested 17 hours into this. I've already invested so much time into this. It's time. Like, I need to at least get the quilt square out of it, because I'm making a book quilt for 2025 and I'm crocheting squares. And then I need to be able to put it in my journal, because that is the least I should get out of this compensation. I need compensation for how terrible that was. So all that being said, I gave it a 2. So sorry if you like that book. Now we're moving on. Onyx Storm, I started in February, finished in March. Let's talk about Onyx Storm. I feel like this book restored my faith in the series. Iron Flame was like, absolutely not. Onyx Storm brought it back. Onyx Storm gave me hope. I really liked this book. I will say, when they were like, a little bit of spoilers, when they were jumping from island to island, I felt like that part dragged, and I was like, what are we doing here? What is the overall goal? Like, what are they trying to overcome? And then they overcame it, and it was kind of really anticlimactic, and I was like, okay, but we still have this much of the book left, so what's gonna happen? And we got there in the end, and the ending was so crazy. It's all I thought about for like 2 days. I had to call my friend and be like, we need to have an emergency conference call about this book. And I have a few theories, so spoilers, I'm gonna give you my theories. One theory is that Xaden went to his mom because she is on the Isle that is the god of knowledge, and so I think he went to her to try and, heal him. But the issue with that is he is bonded to Scale, Scale is bonded to Tarn, and they can't be away from each other. Like, he can't be away from her for too long, she can't be away from Tarn for too long. So someone had to have broken the bond somewhere, which is not unlikely, but also it would make things messy. Where did Andarna come from? Like, she left, but then she's back. I think that she left, and then, like, which, by the way, I sobbed like a baby when she left. When she left, I feel like she probably got halfway, or, like, to the end of the continent, I don't know, and then she was like, wait, they need me. I can't leave them. And then she came back. But I don't know. We'll figure it out. Also, Imogen, I'm so terrible with names. I apologize. Her erasing Violet's memory of her wedding? I'm sorry. I don't care how mad I am. I don't care how sad I am. If I say to my friend, please erase my memory of my wedding, you better not. You better not. You better talk me out of it. So I need answers. I still don't understand, like, fully what happened in the last, like, 100 pages or so. You do need to sit down and read all of that at once. But I cried so many times. I'm so confused. I have so many theories. And I really, really liked Onyx Storm. It brought me back into the world. And I cannot wait for the 4th book. But I have a lot of theories, like I said. Definitely let me know your theories down below if you have read all of them, because I need to know. Last book is Fool Me Once. So this is actually the first book before the boyfriend candidate. So this is the sister, like the OG that's the politician. The thing about this book is I felt that the humor was not as good in this book as it was in the boyfriend candidate, so I was let down. So yeah, I felt like it wasn't as good as the first one, but it was a good audiobook to just listen to in the background. It was feel good, it was witty. I liked Lee and her, like, journey through trauma of, like, losing a parent that you weren't on good terms with. And I did find that parts of her I related to. I definitely related more to her sister, and then I think that Lee is more similar to, like, my sister. But I did like it. I ended up giving it a 5 just because I found myself, like, not able to focus at times on it, and I was just, like, distracted, which is, for me, is a big sign that I am not like obsessed with an audiobook, because if I'm obsessed with it, I pay attention. So that is where we're at. I am currently reading Quicksilver, and then I also am listening to Deep End, which anything by Ali Hazelwood I'm game for, except for Not in Love. I hated that book. DNF that one. But any of her other books I am super into. So once I finish Deep End, I'm going to start Love on the Brain. I also have Main Street Millionaire, but I think I'm going to put that one on hold. I started it, but I think I'm going to put it on hold, buy it in person, and then like use it and like highlight it and stuff, because it has so many good little nuggets that I just want to have on hand at all times. And then I'm also going through Donald Miller's books about branding your business. So I have a lot going on in the book world. But yeah, that is it where I'm at right now. All the books that I've read in 2025 thus far. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what books you loved, what books you hated, what your favorite book is so far. Yeah, whatever else you feel like telling me. I love talking to you guys. It makes me so happy. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, like. It takes 2 seconds. It's free, and it is the best way you can help me grow the podcast. So if you're a woman in her 20s looking for a community of women to grow and build with, you found the right place. Go ahead and join us. I upload every single Sunday. I'm working on rebranding the podcast right now, so that may change soon. But yeah, I love you guys so, so much, and I will see you guys next week. So that's pretty much it. I don't know why I can't remember how I end the podcast. Okay. Bye, guys. Love you.